if we continue on the path that we're on right now, in all likelihood, electricity prices for a typical customer are going to be 20% higher in 4 or 5 years' time than they are now. And that's even if wholesale prices halve. So, we completely support the decarbonisation of electricity. That will begin to bring wholesale prices down. But the non-commodity costs are adding about £300 of pressure onto a typical bill. We've got to do something radical to address that.
If I look at the non-commodity costs, policy costs, network costs, then certainly some of the numbers, some of the modelling that we have suggests that you could get to a position by 2030 where if the wholesale price was zero, bills would still be the same as they are today because of the increase in those non-commodity costs. There are things that I think we can do there. We can move some of those non-commodity costs, particularly the legacy policy costs, feed-in tariff, climate change levy, renewable obligations, off the electricity bill. That would help bring bills down.
The overwhelming evidence that we've received says it's to do with the marginal price. So what would you do about that? And do you agree that it's a problem?
I don't agree with the evidence, to be honest with you. I think that, as Rachel alluded to, what we have in front of us is a system where even if the wholesale price were to halve, as she indicated, the bills will rise.
The country as a whole at the moment is paying over £20 billion a year on their electricity bills for policy costs. Now, the projections are that is going to increase. That is one of the £100 that is possibly going to be added to bills on the current trajectory, electricity bills, over the next 4 years. I think it's time we got this burden under control. There's a lot of good stuff being funded in that 20 billion. But the reality is that it is added to incrementally, piece by piece. Department over here puts in a subsidy for new nuclear. Department over there puts in a subsidy for CCS. There is no budgetary control of this, and yet it all ends up on household bills or in contributing to making our electricity some of the most expensive in the industrialised world.
Well, I would argue it's just simply not true. So you have to do a huge amount of things. Firstly, you are signing up to contracts this year which last for 20 years that are much higher than the current cost of electricity. And if you're signing up to a contract which is effectively a fixed rate mortgage at 10%, instead of using the 4% variable that moves around, you are not going to save any money. So that is the key thing, is all of these promises that have been made about lower bills are based on bogus numbers and dodgy assumptions, and they don't look at the full costs. What those energy bosses were saying is you have to think about, for example, the cost of building out the network. Instead of having power close to where people want it, if you're building it at the top of Scotland and you've got to move it all the way down the country, which is what you're doing with offshore wind, for example, is that costs a huge amount, and you have to take that into account.
Yeah.
So,
Claire, just before we let you go, one of the things that I thought was really fascinating with these representatives of these big energy companies talking to MPs at that select committee was it's almost like the MPs didn't quite believe what they were hearing. There seems to be a bit of a groupthink in Parliament that it is gas that is making our bills more expensive rather than all the green stuff. Do you think that now these energy companies are actually saying this on the record in Parliament, that it's going to get through to energy ministers?
Well, look, I hope so, because I found it when I was in the department as well, and I've talked about this before. There is a massive groupthink, and actually the numbers that the department is using to say to ministers and others that, renewables are cheaper, the numbers that the Climate Change Committee are using, they are simply bogus. They do not look at the full cost. So I'd started this work to do some proper costing. Ed Miliband has come in and cancelled that. And I think that is outrageous, because you have to at least know what you're doing to the country and be honest with people. If you want to have a completely renewable system for your energy, and it will cost a huge amount more, go and sell that to the public. They should be able to have a say. But what he is saying, and what people, have been arguing from the Green lobby for, is that this is going to be much cheaper. Ed has said that he's going to cut your bills by £300 by 2030. That is simply not true.